Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-host, Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank Hennessy, Premier Planning, Ethan Milrod, GoTo, David Jackowitz, Evolution Financial Group, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and David Birdwell, TopStack. And let's see, Matthew, can you give me a rundown on who's going to be on the show today, please?
I sure can. We have a great show coming, Herb. We're starting off with Isabelle Kent, the Executive Director of Philly Startup Leaders. After that, we have Alison Galik, the CEO of Dinova, followed by Ken Stephon, Chairman, President, and CEO of William Penn Bank. And we're wrapping up today with Mark Lacher, the partner at Lacher.
Let's get to know our first guest, Isabelle Kent, Executive Director of Philadelphia Startup Leaders. Isabelle, what is Philly Startup Leaders? What are you guys doing?
So we're a 14-year-old nonprofit here in the greater Philadelphia region that really supports our startups and entrepreneurial community through mentorship, education, networking, and sometimes business grants as well.
Mm-hmm. Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
Yeah, I was actually born in Crimea, formerly during the USSR, and then grew up in Doylestown, all through Bucks County, and then South Jersey. I'm the youngest of two, and so my sister is about 7.5 years older.
So what do you remember? How'd that time feel when you moved from Crimea to the United States? You mentioned you were young. You were about 3 years old. But what was the feeling back then?
Yeah, everything was new and transitioning often. When we moved here, we were living in a motel in Doylestown and then very quickly moved to Dublin and then back to Doylestown. And so we were moving around a lot and the environments that I was in were constantly changing. So constantly in transition, constantly meeting new people and really getting used to a whole new world, in addition to, of course, going through those normal changes when you're a little kid and exploring the world for the first time.
Well, what's all that transition have to do with your role as the head of Philly Startup Leaders?
Yes, well, it really fostered a sense of independence and resourcefulness and being able to interact with people from all different walks of life, certainly folks that were more senior than me or were coming from different environments and experiences. And Ethan? It really gave me a strong...
Isabelle, while you may not have remembered when you came over at 3 or 4 years old, did your parents share with you any stories of what it was like in the Soviet Union?
Yeah, they did. So there were pros and cons. I think like everything, that was all they knew before they moved to the U.S. And so, of course, they had housing and education and some stability in that regard. And they did fairly well, all things considered, in the Soviet Union. But they certainly wanted more upward mobility and variety. And my dad was always a dreamer.
So what effect did that have on you?
Yeah. So, we were always encouraged to be independent, to reach higher, to dream big, and also to never really settle for where we were. My parents were, we moved here during Reconstruction. And so that instability.
It sounds like there's a direct connection between what you were getting in your childhood and what you're providing the community with your head of Philly Startup Leaders. David.
You mentioned that you tried a lot of different things as a child because you were very creative. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went through a whole bunch of different hobbies as a kid. I did ballet, I did charcoal, painting, art classes, karate, guitar, yoga, the whole gamut.
Well, what's all that stuff have to do with what you're doing nowadays?
I love variety. And so I get to work with a lot of different startups. It really has taught me that even if you don't succeed in something or if it's not for you, that's okay. You can always find something else that you can really hone your skills in, and you don't have to be perfect at everything.
Shannon?
Isabelle, in the green room, we talked about how Philly Startup Leaders you guys are doing a lot for the Philly startup community, and that includes a lot of mentoring. And I'm curious, how young were you when you first started mentoring?
I think it's always come naturally to me. I was always kind of the voice of reason in my friend group and always encouraging everybody to think bigger. We grew up in a very international household and traveled and things like that. And so for me, it was always about pushing people to really achieve their potential, to see the world differently, and to always continue in their upward mobility. So I think that really started in my youth and followed me all throughout my life.
Mm-hmm. Frank?
Isabelle, I get the impression that you're deeply concerned about issues related to social justice. How young were you when you witnessed or experienced the need for that?
Almost immediately. Kids really sense that in their environment, I think, very early on. And my parents were certainly experiencing discrimination, with my mom experiencing it at work. My parents didn't speak English very well. And so even myself, I got beat up on the school bus and got nasty comments from kids about what I was eating for lunch. And so being othered was really something that I tapped into early on. And because so many people really gave me the hands up to climb that ladder and become a stable and successful person, I feel that it's important to do that for others.
How does that influence what you do as CEO of Philly Startups?
Yeah. So, we're really focused on helping underserved communities and founders that are often underestimated. And so naturally, that's something that I'm very empathetic towards and certainly want to see us tap into all the potential here in the greater Philadelphia area.
Matthew?
Isabelle, you just said your parents didn't speak English when they came over, or didn't speak it well. I'm curious, what was the transition from the Soviet Union to the U.S. like for your parents?
Yeah, well, it was such a different world because at that time, Moscow had gotten their first McDonald's. And so I think my dad really tapped into the whole idea of what America could be. And so was bumpy. They moved here with 2 kids in a suitcase and lived in a motel when they had master's degrees and stable careers in the Soviet Union. So they had to start from scratch. They really took on every single job, from cleaning and housekeeping to working in factories, which was not what they were doing professionally beforehand. But then were able to grow their skill sets and networks and really move up rapidly. And, it was ups and downs, but we certainly learned a lot from that experience.
And what does watching them go from master's degrees to coming over and having factory jobs and trying to work stuff out? What's that? What did that teach you that you bring to work with you every day?
You have to be humble and resourceful and know that things are temporary. You got to set your sights a lot higher and do what you have to do in order to not only survive, but then really build that foundation that you can thrive upon and really continue learning, expanding, and looking for the folks that can help you get to that next stage.
Mr. Birdwell?
Isabelle, you told us you had a sister, correct?
Yes. Yeah. My sister, Vicky.
How are the two of you different?
So we're 7.5 years apart. And while I think that now as we're older, we have a lot more similarities, we didn't when we were younger. She was in school, she was away. So I think that we just had 2 very different perspectives. She's very tactical. She's mathematic. She's really much more detail oriented than I think I am.
What's it tell us about how you lead today?
I got to learn a lot from her because she always took on a lot of big projects. She ran for office. She took on community development projects. And so I got to learn a lot from her in that regard. But I think that I bring a different perspective, more empathy, more personal engagement. And I think I'm a little bit more of a people person.
Mm-hmm. Ethan, wasn't there some other question about multi-generational or something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, Isabelle, you shared with us earlier in the green room that after you emigrated, much of your family came over too. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what was it like in your household growing up?
Yeah, well, international families are often multi-generational. So once we moved over and we got settled very much due to the help that we received from my parents' friends and network, we brought my grandpa over who was older. He biked to work every day, 20 miles until he was about 78 years old. And then after my grandpa came, my aunt and uncle and their older daughter that was in her late teens, they came over and lived with us in a 2-bedroom apartment in Doylestown. And so it was certainly tight quarters, but we really got to all tap in and really support the family together. And so there was always folks helping each other out because, of course, both my parents worked. So it was a very self-sustaining household.
What do you think impact that had on you?
Everyone had a role.
About what you're doing today.
Yeah, so everyone has their role. Everyone has to chip in and make their own path and contribute to their own success in some way. But also there was a lot of community around us. So whether that was in the family or whether that was people outside of the family that were really tapping in and helping us out, we always had that support from other people. So, everyone pulls themselves up by their bootstraps, but we really had a lot of folks helping us pull ourselves up too.
It sounds to me like you're really built for your job. Matthew?
I'm curious. You've got this community and interactive thing going on, but you also loved logic puzzles, right? How young were you when you loved logic puzzles?
I did. So when you move from a different country, you actually have to take an intake assessment that tells you what your intellectual capacity and capability is. And so I had to take that when I went into elementary school and kindergarten, and then again later in the 3rd and 4th grade where I got put into gifted classes. They were called Penn.
So explain to me how you put together the logic and the community piece in what you're doing right now.
Yeah, well, everything's a system. So that systems thinking that you develop through those critical thinking skills, through the logic puzzles, through seeing how things interconnect is really the core of entrepreneurship and innovation, especially when you're servicing a community, that has some systemic issues that that they really need to address to achieve their full potential. And so that's something that I pull on every day in my career.
And do you like the logic part or the community part more?
Both equally. I'm a mental tinkerer, and so I love working with new ideas and innovations and puzzles and solving challenges. But of course, that human interaction and really working with folks from all different walks of life is something that's incredibly satisfying and important to me.
Wait, what's the website address for Philly Startup Leaders?
Yep. So that's phillystartupleaders.org.
phillystartupleaders.org. We've been speaking with Isabelle Kent, the Executive Director of Philly Startup Leaders here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, it's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, stick around. Don't go away. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break.
You now can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your advisors. Yes, this radio and online social media exposure is free and quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors.
Back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Alison Galik, who is the CEO of Dinova. What is Dinova, Alison? What are you guys doing?
Dinova is a preferred dining program for corporations with 18,000 restaurants across the country.
Wow. Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I grew up in Hamilton Square, New Jersey. I'm one of four. I'm the second of four.
Mm-hmm. And how'd you get a job with this company?
I actually work for two other companies for the private equity firm that owns Dinova.
So this private equity firm had previous experience with you, and a private equity firm has to keep a resources of people that they want to put in as CEO because they're putting a lot of money at stake. And they chose you. So they must have known that you could do a good job. They had faith that you could do a good job and take things the next step. How young were you, 8 to 14, when you were taking things the next step?
Yeah, I would say when I was 9, my parents got divorced, and it kind of forced me to grow up quicker and take on more responsibility.
What kind of more responsibility did you take on when you were 9 years old and parents got divorced?
Yeah, to help my mother raise my younger brothers.
Mm-hmm. So you took on, as opposed to running away, you took that responsibility on. Okay, Mr. Jackowitz.
Alison, what was the impact of your parents' divorce upon you?
Yeah, it was pretty significant as far as a financial impact. My mother had to take on quite a few more jobs in order to help pay the bills. My father was a policeman, so money was very tight. And when the family split, financial impact was quite large.
What's that have to do with who you are nowadays?
Well, I think it has to do with trying to pick up the pieces and help hold the family together, kind of similar to what you need to do when your company goes through difficult times as well.
Mm-hmm. Ethan?
Alison, when you weren't wrangling your younger siblings together, what were you doing keeping you busy when you were 8 to 14?
Yeah, I played softball, soccer, and basketball.
What was your common role amongst those teams?
Yeah, so I wasn't the star player, but I was probably the most team spirited and tried to keep a real fun aspect to the game and no drama.
No drama. So what did that teach you, and how do you carry that forward as the CEO of Dinova today?
Yeah, I think it taught me it's really important to be well liked and be one of the team.
What do you mean? Tell us more.
So I'm a very collaborative leader, and I think that's more important than being the superstar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If we asked the people that worked with you to tell us about you as their CEO, what would they tell us?
I think they'll tell you that I try to find the best in each person, and then I leverage that. I leverage that so that they are doing the job that maybe I can't do or others can't do.
Frank?
Alison, how would you describe Hamilton Square, New Jersey, and what it was like growing up there?
It was a pretty strong community, very Irish Catholic, and kind of tight-knit group.
Tight-knit group. More about the community. So what does being in a tight-knit community group have to do with helping you navigate 18,000 restaurants and hotels?
Yeah, well, the point of what I do today is I'm a connector. I connect large corporations to restaurants that maybe can't necessarily get into that business or that restaurant. And just like a connector when I was younger and part of a community, it's very similar and important to me.
Shannon?
Alison, in the green room, you talked about how a family RV trip to the Riverwalk at San Antonio changed your outlook on things. Tell us more about what you meant by that.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we grew up without a lot of financial backing. So on that trip was my first exposure to a luxury hotel. And I fell in love with the feeling you get when you walk into a beautiful hotel, and I wanted to be in that business. So ever since then, and I worked towards getting in the hotel industry and the travel industry, which then has led me into now the restaurant industry.
So you really set a goal and you went after it.
Yeah.
And what does that tell us about the way you're leading your team today?
Yeah, I absolutely, they would tell you that I set goals and will achieve them.
Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Alison, I get the sense that watching your mom in the aftermath of your parents' divorce, watching her struggle to keep the family and the finances together had an impact on you. What was that impact?
Yeah, I never wanted to be dependent on someone else for my own finances or my own family's finances. So that is what drove me to get the education I have. It has driven me to work hard, and it has driven me to continue to work with private equity to build wealth, not just for myself, but build a very profitable organization.
And what does your mom think about what you're doing now?
She can't believe it.
What, does she tell you that?
Yeah, she's surprised. I probably wasn't, I wasn't always the top student or top athlete, but I seem to be hitting it in my 50s.
Mm-hmm. David.
Alison, in the green room, you told us that you had two younger brothers, correct?
Yes.
What was your relationship like with those two brothers?
I was very close to them, and we played a lot of baseball in the backyard, and we're just tight-knit group, and they tend to follow me a bit, I'd say.
How does that help you run Dinova today?
It's great because I think I got my first leadership role with my two younger brothers. So now I'm leading a much larger organization, and there's a lot of guys in it too. So that probably helped me.
Mm-hmm. Shannon, what else you thinking?
Alison, when you think about a CEO, a lot of times you think of them being in the spotlight and a decision maker. But when it comes to you, you're all about collaborating and being a dependable team player as opposed to being the one not necessarily leading the team, but being part of the team. How does that affect the way you're building your team and the way things are moving forward?
Yeah, I think that people like working for someone where they can shine and they can help make decisions and influence decisions. So that's the way I lead. At the end of the day, I'm calling the shots. So I try to take everyone's opinion, assess it, and then I need to be the one making the decision. I'm the one being held accountable. So I'm just trying to leverage the best out of everybody to do the right thing for our shareholders and our company.
So how young were you when you were trying to figure out who people were, where they fit? How do you work with everybody? How do you get them to play to their strengths? How do you put together the optimal team? How young were you when that was happening?
Probably 11 when I started with my first softball team and tried to help coordinate, the team, I'd say. And then also through my childhood with my brothers and my sister.
What do you mean you tried to help coordinate that team? What are you talking about?
There was a time when we lost our coach and we didn't have a coach anymore and our team was going to be dissolved. And I convinced my mother to pretend she was the coach. And we put the team together and actually played, and I kind of was really the one running it because my mom obviously was pretty busy.
You really do step up to the plate, not only with the divorce at the age of 9, but here it is again with sports. What's the website address of this organization known as Dinova?
Dinova.com.
We've been speaking with Alison Galik, CEO of Dinova, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, and we'd like to introduce Ken Stephon, Chairman, President, and CEO of William Penn Bank. Ken, what is William Penn Bank?
William Penn Bank is a $800 million community bank based in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, with 13 offices throughout the Delaware Valley.
And where are you from originally, and how many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I'm from Hamilton Township, Mercer County, New Jersey. I'm the eldest of 2 boys.
Okie dokie. Ethan.
Ken, what was neighborhood life like growing up in Hamilton Township?
Well, it was a prototypical post-World War II development, and most of the people had moved out of the urban center in Trenton and moved to the suburbs. So it was a very stable type environment. The kids that I went to kindergarten with were basically the same kids that I graduated high school with.
So you had lifelong relationships with your friends?
I did. And even though I moved out of Hamilton as an adult and I moved over to Doylestown, Bucks County, I still have stayed in touch with my closest friends from my childhood.
What does that tell our listening audience about you, Ken?
Well, I think it makes me realize that the depth and importance of those relationships and the loyalty of those relationships have turned out, in retrospect, to be a lifelong thing. And there's tremendous value in that to me. And it's just great to still be able to be in touch as if time never passed in between.
Would you say that's meaningful to your clients?
Well, to us as a community bank, that's sort of what we do. We're much more of a depth and loyalty of relationship kind of financial institution than your typical larger nationwide institution.
Frank?
So the loyalties are important.
So, Ken, tell me more about those relationships and those loyalties. When you were 8 to 14 with your friends, you were doing music and sports. How would your friends describe you? What was your role?
Well, I was kind of I would say, the teetotaler in the group. To me, it was important to maintain the stability and of the environment and the relationships.
So even at a young age, you were the stable guy. You weren't getting everyone into trouble.
I was trying to be the one to stay out and keep us out of trouble.
So interesting. So how does stability in relationships make a difference when you're running a branch with 13 branches?
Well, we try to do the same thing now. We make sure that we develop the relationships, that we everything stays orderly, and that we continue to provide the appropriate aspects of the relationship to build that brand loyalty and to build the customer loyalty for the long haul.
Jackowitz?
Ken, how young were you when you were making money?
Well, I did a few lawn jobs around the neighborhood as a young kid, but then I was 16 when I went to work really for the first time. That was at the Rustler Steakhouse.
And what were you doing at the steakhouse different from all the other kids working there?
Well, I tried to learn all the aspects of the business. I started out bussing tables. I washed dishes. I cooked the steaks. I made the setups. And just, tried to learn all the different aspects of the business.
And what do you bring from learning all the aspects of a steakhouse to running a bank?
I think the most important thing is that every aspect of the business, whether it's a steakhouse, a community bank, or probably any business, is that the various aspects are different in their own right, but they need to be synthesized into something that works effectively together.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Jackowitz?
Ken, in the green room, you were talking about how your grandfather was involved in the coal mining industry in Virginia, and your family had immigrated here from Hungary. How does that impact you today?
Well, the involvement in the coal mining industry was going, hundreds of feet deep into the mine every day. So my family and many of those I knew in my childhood had emigrated from Hungary and worked in the coal mining business. And despite the fact that was sort of a menial type of occupation, that they were still hardworking and very proud of what they were doing for a living. And so I think that translates into, needing to do the same thing no matter what your job is in today's day and age.
So how's that relate to how you're building the bank? The fact that you think everybody should be treated with dignity and respect. How's that permeating the bank build?
Yeah, I think it's very important that people at all rungs of the ladder in the organizational structure realize that what they're doing is critically important, that they have an opportunity for upward mobility, and that no matter what it is that their daily task is, that it contributes to our long-term collective success.
Mm-hmm. Shannon?
And in the green room, you mentioned that Coach Sapio, your Little League coach, was someone that you looked up to as a kid. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, he made a great impression on me during Little League because one of the most important things I remember was that on the very first day of practice, he told us at the end of practice that our team was going to win the championship that year. And that was kind of preposterous when he said it because we didn't view ourselves as a contender and there were other really strong teams in the league. But we took it to heart. I did, and the team did, and we actually won the championship with an undefeated season. And I thought it was just incredible the way he set the tone right on day one for us to have a collective goal together and the way we achieved it.
And what do you carry from Coach Sapio with you today?
I think it's important, in our industry, there are giant banks, nationwide banks, large regional banks, and a small community bank like ours needs to strive just that same way, to understand that we can be the best provider of banking and financial services to our local community. And it's very much, trying to win that same championship that we talked about in Little League.
Mm-hmm. David?
Ken, in the green room, you talked to us about your father and your grandfather, but I don't recall hearing about your mom. Can you talk to me about your moms and your mom's family?
Sure. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. This is the 1960s, and most of the kids I grew up with had a stay-at-home mom. And but my mom was very obviously, dedicated to taking care of the family. Also very close with her own family, her own mother and brother and sister. And so we had really on both sides of my family, very close-knit family growing up.
And what's that have to do with how you run the bank today?
I think it's sort of the structure of how we try to have a family atmosphere is sort of the same way. We try to maintain those same kind of family ties amongst our colleagues together, and then impart that same kind of culture and approach to what we do in the community.
So you're the chairman, president, and CEO of William Penn Bank. Yeah, and you're like in the middle of this whole community. How young were you when you found yourself in the middle of a community when you were a kid, 8 to 14?
Boy, well, again, the sports that I played and things like that had a large impact on me and my ability to, kind of view that larger picture. But it really was, I was, again, in the same small town, kind of growing up, up until my college years, really. And so, one thing that really struck me when I was a senior in high school was that I kind of wanted to broaden my horizons and go away to school. But for family financial reasons, my parents wanted me to stay local and to go to the local, which I did, Trenton State College. So
your nature is to grow, but stay connected to your roots, it sounds to me like Hamilton to Doylestown is not 1,001 miles. And it sounds to me like, that's what you're doing with this bank is you're staying really local and tied to your roots while growing the bank and the community. Am I picking up the right stuff?
I think you've got the exact story of what we are and what we're trying to do. We're very, very connected strongly to our local community. We want to make sure that those roots are very strong and deep. And yet we want to take our own success and broaden it and take it to, a greater geographic dispersion as well as, continue to grow the franchise going forward.
How interesting. What's the website address for this organization known as William Penn Bank?
It is williampenn.bank.
williampenn.bank. We've been speaking with Ken Stephon, Chairman, President, and CEO of William Penn Bank here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. Don't go away.
Recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, Executive Leaders Radio. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable. Yes, this radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors for free exposure.
We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, and we'd like to introduce Mark Lacher, partner in Lacher. Mark, what is Lacher? What are you guys doing?
We're a second-generation family-owned firm located in Souderton, and we help companies and individuals with insurance, risk management, and benefits.
And how large or how small is this team? How many brothers and sisters do you have? And where are you in the pecking order?
Yeah, we have about 50 employees that work for us, and I'm the middle of 3 boys.
Okie dokie. And how'd you get involved with this business?
My brother and I purchased the business from my father, Greg, in 2007.
Okie dokie. And what do you do different So you're working with your brother. What do you do different than your brother in the business?
Yeah, we've been able to carve out spaces for one another. So he runs our risk management team and I run our employee benefits practice.
Okie dokie. Matthew?
Yeah, Mark, I'm one of three brothers, too. We grew up beating up on each other, playing sports, being nasty to each other. Where did it come from that you're working with one of your brothers now?
Yeah, I think we've been I think we've been able to take some of that stuff that we learned when we were young and that competitive spirit and use it today to make us successful partners together. And we've also been able to carve out space, between what one of us does in the business. And yeah, so it's been awesome actually working together as a family.
How young were you when you kind of started that transition from brotherly rivals to friends enough that you could work together long term?
Yeah, certainly that came later in life, not at the younger ages where we're competing for everything. So I'd certainly say when we became partners, we really realized we had to work together. We had something really special. And actually that our ability to work together was a competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Jackowitz?
So tell us a little bit about what did your mom and dad do for a living?
Yeah, so my dad was in the insurance business and my mom was a special ed teacher.
So how does that tie into who you are today? Or how does that make,
Yeah, how does it tie into who you are?
Yeah, so my dad certainly had an entrepreneurial spirit. He started off as a foreman on a construction crew and then was asked to come join an insurance business and grew it really substantively. And then my mom certainly had high EQ, sense of empathy, connection, working with kids in a special education environment. And those two things combined together, I think, is what it takes to be a really successful business leader today.
Mm-hmm. Ethan?
Mark, tell us, how young were you when you first started making money?
Yeah, so we had the benefit of having a tennis court in our backyard. And so we spent so much time playing tennis that we turned it into a business in the summers. And we taught younger kids in the community how to play tennis. So it was a great first job.
I bet if we asked those kids what you were like as an instructor, what would they tell us?
I'd hope they say that I was patient, but also firm with them. I mean, we really wanted them to develop into good tennis players and good people. So, yeah, I think the combination of those two things.
Do you find that the traits as you as an instructor, a tennis instructor, have been carried forward to what you're doing today with your team today?
Yeah, 100%. Because I think, when you're teaching someone tennis, you're trying to take advantage of their unique skills, talents, and abilities. And that's exactly what we do as business leaders, right? We try to make sure that the people that we have on our team that we're really playing to their strengths.
Mm-hmm. Frank?
Go back to your mom, Mark, teaching you high emotional IQ and self-awareness. What did she teach you that helps three brothers come together?
Yeah, I mean, obviously she was the one that had to help us come down from our competitive battles on the tennis court. And since it was in our backyard, we often walked in and, she had to help us. Okay, you're still brothers. You have to love one another at the end of the day. So, yeah, we learned a lot from her about making sure that, at the end of the day, we stuck together.
Well, how does that ability to work together and value each other's skill set help you serve your clients' needs today?
Yeah, I think our clients need us to be not only innovative, but also they need to see that we're a team. Helping them think about how to run their organization better and manage these areas of risk, benefits, so forth and so on. So it's highly complementary.
Mm-hmm. Shannon?
Mark, you're known in the industry for your commitment to innovation. I'm curious, when did innovation first start showing up? How young were you?
Yeah, so I think my dad would probably say that I've always been looking forward. And I think that is something that, really plays well in the business world. Especially because our clients, most of them are very large family-owned middle market companies, and they need us to be forward-looking, and they trust us to be thinking about their companies critically, but also what's coming next, and what do they need to be working on next. So yeah, I think that started at a very, very young age for me.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Birdwell?
Mark, can you give me an example of when the competitive edge started to show itself?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really enjoyed about playing tennis is that I generally was playing up. meaning I was playing against kids that were older than me. And that's when I really realized that, I really had this competitive thing, and it was super fun, but it also could propel me to be more successful, not only on the tennis court, but also in life.
And what's that show us and how you run Lacher today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So certainly you have to tamp down some of the competitive juices when you're running a business, because you have people that you're working with. So it's really that combination of, connecting to the individuals and then using that competitiveness where it's appropriate and when it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm. What did you learn on the tennis court that helps you in life? That's crazy.
Yeah. So tennis is an individual sport. So, you have to go through the ups and downs by yourself, and you don't have another set of teammates or individuals to rely on. And I think that that's what it teaches you. It teaches you to be able to go through the ups and downs, not only in life, but also as a business leader.
8 to 14, what was the most memorable tennis match you played?
Most memorable one. So probably I played in a national tournament in Texas. It was 120 degrees out. We were all required to have 3 jugs on the court. That was probably the most memorable tournament.
And what did you learn at that tournament that you bring with you every day to Lacher?
Hydrate.
And then you mentioned you did a lot of traveling, and the traveling exposed you as a kid. What do you mean the traveling exposed you, and what's the upside of that travel and that exposure nowadays?
Yeah, I think traveling at that age exposes you just to a whole host of different people from different backgrounds, and that's what makes the world go around. And it was a great experience for me, and certainly being able to learn about individuals at that stage and ask questions and get to know them, and all those things translate to what we do today.
Yeah, wait a minute. But I asked you, what was the exposure? And you're telling me it exposed you to a lot of different kinds of people. But I'm trying to figure out how that has anything to do with building a business, an insurance and an employee benefits business.
Yeah. So our clients are executives, are other leaders. And so we need to get to know them, and being able to ask effective questions. Being able to get to know them personally and individually is incredibly important before they trust us to work with them as a business. So that's how it applies.
Huh. So you're traveling as a kid and playing and meeting other tennis teams, and helped you tune into other people, which helps you tune into executives and their teams nowadays. All right, that makes sense.
Mark, you talked about you coaching kids. What did your coaches teach you that you still use in business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the value of friendship and the value of being there when things are going good and things are going bad. So the tennis coach was always there when you finish the match, whether you win or lose. And in tennis, it's pretty cut and dry, right? So just that value of being there, to support not only me individually at that point in time, but now for me to support the team, because we do win and lose.
You do win and lose. So that's how you run Lacher?
Well, obviously we prefer winning, and I think we've been really successful for the most part, but clearly there are times when we don't. And I think you have to be prepared for that to help mentor your team through those times.
Mm-hmm. And this team of 50 people, if anybody is there a lot of turnover compared to the industry averages?
No, in fact, there's not.
Why not?
We generally don't hire anyone from inside the insurance industry.
You grow your own people.
We hire people for skills and traits and abilities and character and competency, and then we train them.
Perfect. What's the website address of this organization known as Lacher?
LacherInsurance.com.
How do you spell that?
LACHER.
LACHERinsurance.com. We would speak with Mark Lacher, partner of Lacher, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Matthew, would you please give us a rundown of who else we had the opportunity of speaking with today?
I'd love to. We had a really entertaining and educational show today. We started off with Isabelle Kent, the Executive Director of Philly Startup Leaders. Then we had Alison, Galik, the CEO of Dinova. We followed that with Ken Stephon, Chairman, President, and CEO of William Penn Bank. And just now we wrapped it up with Mark Lacher, a partner at Lacher.
I'd like to thank my co-hosts, including Shannon Lane Newmark, Knight Frank Hennessy, Premier Planning, Ethan Milrod, Go2, David Jackowitz, Evolution Financial Group, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and David Birdwell's Top Stack for giving me a hand structuring the questions. They'll be providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. I'd like to thank our listening audience for listening. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a radio show. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today, and have a nice day. Bye.